Morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Esther. I'm a professor at the University of Campinas in the Institute of Computing, and I want to welcome everybody to these talks. So I'm really happy to receive here Alessandra Sciutti and Dra.Ana Tanevska from the Institute, the Italian Institute of Technology. This is an initiative from the Hub of Artificial Intelligence and Cognitive Architectures. HIAC, as we call it, is a new space, a new group in the University of Campinas, along with the Eldorado Institute, a research institute in our country, that supported by the Ministry of Science and Technology, are researching towards allowing for smarter agents with cognitive, the help of cognitive architectures and cognitive systems. So we research in our group, we are over 50 researchers looking to push the boundaries of AI systems by approaching our solutions towards cognitive architectures. So we have a series of talks along the year, and then we are going to start this year with this amazing introduction from our partners in Italy. And I'm going to briefly introduce we have two time slots in our talk. So we are going to restart with Anna, and she's going to talk about the Icub, the Cognitive Architecture Initiative. And Anna is a postdoctoral researcher at the Italian Institute of Technology in Genoa, within the ERC funded project called Whisper, and she's supervised by Alessandra, investigating what we call shared perception between humans and robots. Anna obtained her PhD in bioengineering and robotics from the University of Genoa in March 2020, and she has worked with the theme towards a cognitive architecture for socially adaptive human-robot interaction. And prior to moving to Italy, she obtained a bachelor in computer science and engineer and a master's in intelligent systems engineers and robotics from FCSE in Macedonia. Anna is mainly interested in cognitive robotics, adaptation and human-robot interaction, and socially assistive robotics. Their work on cognitive architectures for socially adaptive human-robot interaction has been published in multiple IEEE and ACM conferences, including ICDL, HRI, and SMC, as well as Frontiers in Robotics and AI. And since 2020, November 2020, she has been working as a scientific secretary and events coordinator of the Icub Scientific Initiative under the lead of Professor Julius Sandini. So I will let you speak, and then I can give a brief introduction to Alessandra later. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us. It's a pleasure. It's like summertime in Brazil, summer holiday. So everybody that is here is really interested in what you're talking. The researchers from our group, other researchers from other centers of artificial intelligence are also here. So I've seen many names from other groups in Brazil. So I welcome everybody, and I open to you, Anna and Alessandra, to start the presentation. Thank you again in the name of the Hub of Artificial Intelligence and Cognitive Architectures.
Thank you very much, Esther, and thank you for the introduction. I usually am terrified of introducing myself, so I never start the presentations with a slide about that. So as you can see now, I will share my screen, and I will dive actually immediately into the Icub. So, okay, I'll just give a second for, okay, I think we're there. So, thank you, Esther. As you said, I have been with the Icub scientific initiative at the Italian Institute of Technology since more or less its beginning, which was November 2020. And so it's over a year now. The ICOG is one of the new scientific initiatives that have started recently at our research institute that are not per se a research line or a specific department, nor a small project. They are something in between. So they are aimed to be a scientific initiative uniting research from multiple research lines. So forming a very nicely collaborative and interdisciplinary group that seeks to address some big problem or big concept. And I will talk now in the next minutes about what we are actually doing at ICOG. Okay. That's very slow, but okay. In the talk, I will talk why ICOG was started as an initiative and what are our goals. And then we will also talk a bit about the first year plans, both locally, so what has been done at the Italian Institute of Technology, but also internationally, so more about our research, which will also include kind of an open invitation to your group, seeing as how we are aiming to be a very collaborative and open initiative. We will talk, I will talk about where we are in IIT, and I will talk more specifically about the Icub Robot and its history that is now over 15 years, how it started as a project in the, funded by the European Commission, how it developed, and what were the different, let's say, facets that it seeks to address, both from the hardware and software side, but also from the bigger scientific research question side. And then we will talk a bit about the industrial and cognitive sciences perspectives and about the goals of the initiative. So I'm sure that the majority of our audience already knows, since we are all people interested in cognitive architecture, cognitive robotics. We will be talking now within the context of ICOG about cognitive systems. Just to quickly give a definition, we will talk about actually adaptive systems that can be either natural or artificial, of course. The natural ones, prime example being us people. Cognitive systems represent adaptive systems that can act in a predictive and context-dependent or context-sensitive way, which is enabled by the core cognitive abilities. These cognitive abilities include attention, perception, learning, decision-making, memory, reasoning based on some values, and so on. However, cognitive systems, so of course the natural ones, such as ourselves, we know that we have our implicit way of functioning, but when we try to program an artificial one, the way that we do that is by modeling it, and more specifically by modeling a cognitive architecture. So all of these core cognitive abilities, first of all, have to be programmed for a system. They have to be specified how, depending also on the body of the cognitive system or on the cognitive agent, and they have to be integrated. But moreover, not only do they have to be programmed and be functional, they also have to be integrated in a way that they are coordinated. So in a way, in an architecture, so that they can select and prospectively, so with a way of prediction, control the actions that this kind of system or this kind of agent needs to do in order to achieve some goal. The cognitive architecture, when we talk about a theoretical artificial system, can be a very, very theoretical architecture. But when we talk about cognitive architecture in robotics, the way that we the way that we foresee this happening and the way that we are working on it is, in a way, a form of software framework. So I will talk a bit about existing architectures later on in the talk, and we will see that this is not so obvious that it has to be adaptable software framework, because when we talk about cognitive architectures for robots, we are inevitably tying this in with the physical body. And this touches on another topic that I think Alessandra probably will talk more about later on, which is the concept of embodiment, and whether having a body, having a physical body, is an important part for a cognitive ability of an agent or not. However, in the context of ICOG, we are actually interested in having a physical body of our agent, which is the robot, and a software framework, which is the one that carries the cognitive architecture. So ICOG happened at this particular moment because we are really hitting kind of a crucial milestone in our research. So we have kind of three main criteria on why we wanted to reunite the different research lines that have been working. And one of them, the first one actually, was to finally advance the strategy behind the Icub. So the Icub project began, and these are very, very old slides that Alessandra probably has very nice nostalgia, began in 2004 as the RobotCup project. And I think we still think of it as 15 years ago, mostly because probably our mental timekeeping stopped before the pandemic, but actually now we are closer to 20 years ago. The RobotCup project was a European Commission funded project that ran from 2004 until 2010. And as you can see, it was the robotic open architecture technology for cognition, understanding, and behavior. And within this project, the Icub humanoid robot was actually created, so designed, built, and all of its software modules were programmed and integrated on it. But that was only one of the, let's say, goals of the RobotCup project. It was to build a platform that will enable us to research cognition, but also advance our understanding of cognition. So in a way, not only study the robots, but use the robot as a platform to study human cognition, and then have this platform as an available outlet on where to program all of our understanding. So the RobotCup project was designed with a very multidisciplinary approach and united researchers both from robotics, humanoid robotics, but also from neuroscience. And actually the embodied cognition was very much based on the framework on the mirror neurons model. The RobotCup, sorry, apologies, I need to remember to switch off my phone. The RobotCup project within itself also started the first beginnings of the Icub cognitive architecture, which already from 2005 started being, let's say, designed as a way to unite all of the different modules, all of the different software modules that were programmed for Icub. And as you can see, the starting point, I hope you can see the last, were this kind of strata that were looking at all of the Icub embedded systems on the hardware, providing a next layer, which was software architecture. And then on top of that was going to be the cognitive architecture. However, what we saw over these years was that designing this top layer, this cognitive architecture, was quite more difficult than we could anticipate. So actually a lot more work was done within the RobotCup project on this middle layer, the software architecture layer. Within that one, we were working on the middleware, which was the YARP middleware, allowing for the robot hardware to communicate with all of the software modules and on the software modules themselves. What was not so easy was then to unite these. And to briefly give a recap, so like I said, our mental timekeeping has stopped in 2019. The number of Icub robots by now are actually 48 as of January 22. And it still is the most used humanoid robot for studying intelligence and cognition. There has been a lot of software since the heart of the RobotCup and also Icub project has been always to have open source and open software and open science approach. Lot of papers. And more recently, what we have started doing, and I will come back to this later, is a bit more unified approach to the production of our software and on how to make all of our different modules be integrated more easily. Over these 17 years, the groups in IIT have worked on a very, very diverse and rich collection of behaviors. These here are just a fraction of them, and these are all from the IIT groups, but actually worldwide, there are a lot of robots that are outside of Genoa and outside of IIT. So As I said, there's 48 platforms that are currently working, and they all have designed really a marvelous set of behaviors and abilities, from what Esther was talking about, the group of Daniela that's working on adding propulsion to the humanoid robot to make it fly, to groups that work with neuroscientists and psychologists to really understand the minute details of social interaction. We have groups that work on walking, on dynamics. We really have this very, very nice collection of abilities, but we don't have an architecture. What we have seen in these 15 years is that assembling this kind of set of behaviors and abilities does not automatically produce an intelligent system. It produces a robot that can do a lot of different things, but as David Vernon put it in the book A Roadmap for Cognitive Development, the development is not there. Here I want to mention, not to mention, but to quote an idea from Professor Sandini on how we've started and how we are developing. It's a very good idea to add functionalities to a robot. It's very nice when we add a lot of functionalities, but at some point we really stop having an intelligent, well-working machine. We just keep adding more and more functionalities, more and more modules that work, and we don't have an intelligent framework that's uniting these. So where we are right now at our research group, but also in general in cognitive robotics, is this point where we need to refer to a cognitive architecture. So an additional point is not only for Icub on what has been done, but a cognitive architecture is also important in general for fostering a new robotics industry. If we look at robotics and what is being promised currently, if we exit our academic environment and we try to see what's being written in the media, how robotics are being presented to the rest of the world, we see that we are promising these intelligent social robots that can collaborate with humans everywhere, in the office, in their workplaces. They can work with elderly and assist them, they can work with children. But we are promising a lot right now, and we don't have the possibility to deliver. We are currently at a point where the robot's physical abilities are developing very, very quickly and very efficiently. We see with Boston Dynamics and with many, many other companies that we have really amazing physical feats, but we don't have the second part of that, which is the social, the understanding of these physical abilities, the understanding behind an interaction, or as Professor Sandini has put it, we have a very strong and agile body, but we have a very weak and clumsy mind of the robot. And this is also a very good explanation on what's been wrong recently when we've had some social robotic platforms that have been released in the market, is that all of these have been lacking this kind of social understanding. If we see at which are the most widely accepted robotic platforms or widely used, we can see that these are all, in a way, so-called stupid robots, but they're not really stupid. They're robotic arms in factories or robotic vacuum cleaners. They are robots that have very, very small, very well-defined tasks, and that can perform those beautifully, and that don't really need understanding. On the other side, all of the robots like Jibo, like Kuri, that have been released commercially and marketed as social robots, they have not succeeded. These are due to how we present these kind of super exaggerated expectations. So we try to promote robot understanding as something beyond just the mobility, so just the motion and the sensing of the robot, and currently this is not there yet. So social robots still definitely need to be able to relate to humans. They need to be able to understand humans and to anticipate their intentions, and this will not be kind of important and crucial just in humanoid robots, that it will be important kind of also in other robotic platforms, including, for instance, autonomous cars. This is something that is being worked on trying to predict human behavior. Because for any kind of robot that will be involved in interaction with humans, be it a humanoid robot that's assisting the elderly, or being an autonomous car that has to drive in traffic where you have other people that are driving, or the pedestrians, this kind of human understanding has to be present. And this is something that cannot be achieved solely by having motion and perception. And finally, the third goal of Icub, and why we have to unite for approaching again the question of cognitive architectures, is also to advance cognitive science. In order to be able to program a cognitive architecture, we need to start studying cognitive systems more and more. We have to, as I mentioned, move from the implementation of all these individual behaviors that we've collected and programmed in the robot, but to see how they converge into a cognitive architecture. This here is one possible hypothetical solution, but actually there are many, many more that are available. And this is another idea that Alessandra will talk about more later, which is that not only can we use robots to program them, but we can use them in interaction with humans to understand more properly how human cognition works. And this, in a way, will then allow us to close the loop and use this knowledge to program cognition on the robots. When trying to understand cognitive system, moving beyond just the action and perception, we will have to have a couple of other keywords in mind, such as anticipation, such as causality, such as adaptability, but not only adaptability, but also the time scales of it. So short scale and long-term scale adaptability. And of course, also internal models and mental simulation. And just to recap again, this gives us the rationale behind the Icub initiative. We need robots that will be able to act in a predictive, context-sensitive, and imaginative way. This will be realized by building on all of the core cognitive abilities that we already have and that we already have working on the Icub robot, but now encapsulated in a cognitive architecture. The Icub initiative is envisioned as a means, not as an end. So we want to restart the research that was originally planned in the RobotCup project to create a cognitive architecture, supporting embodied cognitive research, and also advance our understanding. In order to do this, especially in this first year of Icub, we have focused a lot on creating an extended research community. This has been also in IIT between the different research lines, but also expanded outward. So having a network of international labs. The next ones that will be in year 2 and year 3 will be starting to implement and test and of course share the core components of the cognitive architecture. Icub, of course, is a very open initiative, and the RobotCup project also was a project consisting of an international consortium, and same as how the Icub platform is a worldwide existing platform with open source code, we still believe in the fact that international collaboration and exchange of ideas between many different groups will only give us a more encompassing and more inclusive knowledge of cognitive systems. So within IIT, this has been through the extended community of Icub, which, as you can see, includes many different centers from robotics, but also neurophysiology. It includes social cognition and neuroscience. It includes also a lot more dynamic interaction control, humanoid sensitive perception. So we are still continuing with the same spirit of uniting neuroscience and humanoid robotics, but also adding other necessary branches that are necessary in general for cognitive science. That are necessary for cognitive sciences in general, such as psychology, such as sociology. Some of the groups that are internationally included in Icub involve the Rwanda Research Center with David Vernon, the University of Bremen with Michael Dietz, University of Waterloo with Kirsten Dautenhan and Christopher Nehaniv, Bielefeld, Lisbon, Maryland, and of course the University of Genoa more locally here. And we are always keeping it as an open invitation to anyone that's interested in furthering research in cognitive robotics. This, and I will leave it also later on as the last slide when I'm done with the presentation, is our sharing infrastructure. We have been organizing a lot of talks in this last year that are all shared publicly. I think also Leticia here knows all of them and can share the links, but we have them here and we will share them with you. We have, of course, social media accounts to be able to more easily share news about the events, and internally within IIT a Microsoft Teams channel. And we have more specifically organized two very interesting, one I think way more than the other workshops. The Transair workshop of March 21 was an incredible 3-day workshop uniting a lot of researchers and speakers from cognitive architectures. And we were very happy to be there as one of the co-organizers with Icub. It was a workshop uniting researchers both from theoretical or traditional cognitive architectures and more modern robotic cognitive architecture groups. And it was really about discussing the current capabilities and future prospections on development in cognition. There was also last year within the scope of ICDL 21, we organized the PhilCog workshop, which was more specifically about the role of affect in the development of cognition. So touching just on one small facet of cognition, which is the motivation, but still within the scope of Icub. And further on, we have, these are all of the events and workshops that we have organized. They are all available on our website. And I strongly encourage you, if you have the time, to have a look at them and watch the videos if you like, because some of these topics were incredibly nice. They covered, we have also a 3-day seminar from David Vernon on cognitive architectures, and we had very nice talks from researchers from all over the world. Going back to our goals of ICOG, so they are twofold, as we said, creating a cognitive architecture and advancing our understanding. For the cognitive architecture itself, we have all of the modules, all of the individual abilities, and what we lack is the way to encapsulate it currently. But we are not the only researchers. So over these 40 years, there have been over 80 cognitive architectures that have come out. Some of them, as you can see from the time scale, have been started as projects and ended, but a lot of them are still being developed, that they're still being updated. Here is our own Icub one that is there, is alive. However, something that's more interesting to mention are how are all of these cognitive architectures implemented. And this was a very nice analysis in the survey of Koceruba and Tsotsos that came out in 2020. And here we can see all of the different modalities of interaction. So these are the axes of vision, proprioception, auditory, touch, smell, and multimodal interaction, and how they are implemented per cognitive architecture. Meaning whether they are not implemented at all, whether they are just as a simulation, whether they include also some physical sensors, or whether they're properly fully integrated on a platform. And as you can see, not a lot of these cognitive architectures are implemented on a physical system. We have some, but this says that there is this gap that needs to be bridged. The gap between theoretical cognitive scientific research and between the robotic research that works with actual physical platforms. What we have and what we are doing in our group is already working on these intuitive and perspective robots. And we are very much interested in having the robot not only be a machine that does some modules, but also be a communicator. So this is the first step towards reaching a proper understanding of cognition. to understand how we communicate with robots and how we can use this knowledge in order to better program the robot. So what we use the Icub for in our group, and I will only briefly touch on this because Alessandra will talk a lot more about it soon after me, is understanding how the robot can be used as a communicator to send implicit signals and how it can read the same kind of implicit signals from us in interaction. This gives us the action perception loop in a way. So we have the robots that can recognize a lot of things from us and that can communicate via physical motion a lot of things to us. And then what we want to get from there to cognition, we need to expand the loop. So expanding the action perception loop actually will allow us to bridge the gap between just theoretical cognitive sciences and robots that have very limited interaction but not a lot more understanding. So adding the anticipation, the adaptation, and the learning to the action perception loop will be the proper step. And in this line, we are considering actually a lot of cognitive frameworks that are out there. There is no shortage of cognitive frameworks. What we are trying to do also, in addition to this, is work on how to make our research easily shareable with other groups. So we are trying to have a platform-independent solution that doesn't rely only on one programming language or only on one middleware, but is able to be then ported also to other robotic platforms. Of course, within Icub, we have the Icub Robot, but a platform that's shared in a platform-independent way can be then also implemented on other, architecture that's shared in a platform-independent way can be also implemented on other platforms. And finally, beyond just creating the cognitive architecture, we are also wanting to advance our understanding, and that's something that cannot be done if we don't have an interdisciplinary approach, which is why it's been so important for Icub to unite different groups of IIT. So we no longer have only a group that works in robotics and perception, but we also unite other researchers. Within that, I will quickly mention here some, which are all incredible groups if you want to look at their work. So we have Lorenzo Natale, who is with the humanoid sensing and perception, and they are the group that works on perception of object and object manipulation. Then we have the groups of Agnieszka and also Lorenzo that are doing a collaboration together on attention and perception. So how you can shift perception of ourselves to the perception of others and how we can try to change this point of view and how attention can be modeled in interaction. For manipulation and navigation, there is the group of Arasha Judani, who is working in the human-robot interfaces and physical interaction research unit. They are really working a lot on the dynamics side of it, which is also a very crucial thing because having cognitive architecture will still be implemented in a robot. The robot will still be a physical dynamic system present in the world, same as how we are. And when we talk about implicit kind of interaction, we don't only think about the implicit social, but also the implicit physical one, which has to do with the physical constraints of the system, which is the world that we live in. And finally, from the more social side, we have the interaction and understanding, and also adaptation and motivation. And on these two, I will not talk a lot because they will be very much nicely explained by Alessandra after me. So with this, we wish to, I will close the talk on Icub here. We wish to extend an open invitation on any research group that is interested to study cognition, either from theoretical side, from cognitive sciences or a neuroscientific side, or from a robotic side and is more interested in the software implementation of it. We are very much interested to see how it will progress. These 15 years of research within the Robot Cub and the Icub project have been really incredible in terms of the abilities and functionalities that we have ended up with, but we think that the most exciting part comes now. where we will work on actually designing understanding robots that can interact with us, that have this kind of extra layer on top of the sensing, on top of the acting, that allows them to understand what we want, and that allows them to be very, very adaptive and humane interaction partners. So with that, I thank you for your attention. I will leave here the links for ICOG. If you have any questions, of course, I'm at your disposal. We are a very young initiative, so we don't have a lot of interesting results, unfortunately, to present, but we are very, very happy to start collaborating with even new groups. So thank you, and let me know if you have any questions. And then I leave it to Alessandra.
Thank you so much, Anna, for the amazing presentation. I have loads of questions, but I think I will open for the public right now. So as anyone has any questions, we can also come back at the end, because I think there will be questions that are going to relate to your talk and to Alessandra's. But if anyone in the audience has any questions, you can raise your hand. I can let to the end. I don't know. Anyone? I have one question for you as people get less shy, but you said that you have 48 Icubs around the world.
Yes.
And I've heard from Professor Maria Escobar that I think Chile has acquired the first one in Latin America. Yeah, so I'm really jealous of her, and I hope that we can work hard to have one here in Brazil. But is that true? Like, you only have this one in Chile, no other robots in Latin America?
I think so. I mean, Alessandra can support me here if you have, but I think that
I'm not sure, honestly. We should ask Icub Tech, which is the unit that is more in charge of really taking notes about. I heard that the number was leaning toward 50 Icub.
So I can very quickly now, let me do this thing, and I hope it will show.
Oh, okay, cool.
So we have here the map of where are the robots, and currently we are at 48. I think this is the updated one.
Okay, cool. So,
that's what, I mean, 2 are, I guess, in the making. So
yes.
That's, because yesterday I spoke with the press office in IIT, and they were mentioning that now the 50 tagline was reached.
I do hope we can work together so we can try to bring one to Brazil, because I think with our initiatives here, it's going to be amazing, because we also develop our robots, but as a platform that has been widely used for cognitive architectures, I think it's an amazing. Like, I'm a follower from the beginning. So I want to ask another thing. Like, I know that you have a simulator for Icub, but
yes,
but in terms of the cognitive architecture itself, do you intend to you said that it's being built in such a way that it's not dependable a lot on the physical robot or the physical platform.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, and I mean, how this can be extended. I mean, because we develop our frameworks and our cognitive architectures ourselves in Brazil, and in particular in RIAC, we are developing it in such a way that is like driven towards mobile phones. So like different sensors, some sensors we share, but with robotics, but there are other sensors that are different, and we approach in a different way. But the process itself of understanding the other, or what we are interacting with, anticipating, and mental simulation, and everything is actually the same. Although I think Alessandra is going to talk about a lot about embodiment, but in such a way, many of these processes can be translated to other applications that are beyond robots. So how is the ICOG, like the cognitive architecture behind it, free for us in terms of using in another platforms?
So in a very, and thank you for the question, by the way, it's a very, very nice question. It's a very similar way on that. the way that we have, and I mean, I can probably scroll through the slides, but I don't remember at which, in the robots, I can talk about Icub specifically, but in most of the robotic platforms, we have these 3 layers of software, hardware, and the middleware, right? So how they communicate with the robot. Most of the work that we are doing on the cognitive architecture will be solely in the software layer. So in IIT, we have YARP as a middleware that allows us to use the exact same code in software with different robots already, because the middleware allows it to bridge the different sensors or different actuators in one robot or in another, having them then in the same way communicating with the software. And currently that's the same approach that we are taking also for the cognitive architecture. The cognitive architecture developed solely in whatever you want, in Python, in C++, can then communicate with a different middleware if necessary. We would ideally like to have a cognitive architecture that can work both with YARP and with ROS. Because in IIT, we have YARP, which is our middleware that we use with all of the robotic platforms. But we recognize, even if we can be a bit like bitter about it, we recognize that ROS is way more used in general. And so we already have wrappers for ROS that allow us to essentially have a ROS wrapper on our code so that it's usable also with another robot that uses the ROS platform. We would like to do that, ideally to have also middleware independent architecture, which would be very nice.
Okay, so just my last question, so we won't stay longer here. I have many, but is this, do you have wrappers as well for all the cognitive architectures? I mean, like you have like SOAR that is really used in some situations, and you can like connect with that and use some of the things that are already stable or being widely used. We do this in our framework. So I mean, do you have these wrappers or for the cognitive architectures?
Currently not yet. We are looking into SOAR, Clarion, and LIDA, specifically because we had the very nice chance at Transair to have the people that are working on them talking with us. And we would like to see how easy it will be to do the wrappers for them. And then also to see to which extent we would like we would like to use them. So same as for you, for SOAR, you use the entire architecture or you use specific modules that are necessary for you?
I think that's something that we can talk a lot later, because inside our group, we are like, we built our architecture in such a way that we can work with others like LIDA and so the same, like the same reference architectures that are available. So, and this idea of also working with different deep learning frameworks and also trying to bring this to, because I think there is a really huge gap in cognitive architectures, bridging with these like state-of-the-art deep learning methods. So we are trying to achieve some of these in our work as well. So I think there is a lot of room for us to discuss with other. We also are studying a lot of federated learning and how to spread our learning systems or to distribute the decisions. So that's our goal inside here. So I think we have a lot of room to talk later. But thank you so much, Ana, for like the great explanation. And I do hope we can have an Icub in this.
Thank you. I'll let now to Alessandra to talk about a lot more interesting things, with a lot more results.
I'll just ask to introduce you. I know that Ana already talked, but Alessandra is going to talk about social perspective on cognitive architectures. And she's a tenure track researcher, head of CONTACT, that is a cognitive architecture for collaborative technologies unit of the Italian Institute of Technology. She has a master's and bachelor degree in bioengineering bioengineer and a PhD in humanoid technology from the University of Genoa. And after researching in USA and Japan, she has been awarded the ERC Starting Grant Whisper that is focused on investigating joint perception between humans and robots. She has published a huge amount of works in international journals and conferences, and in the coordination of the Codec for European Artists project, and she's currently an associate editor for several journals that are related to our topics, like the International Journal of Social Robotics, Transactions of Cognitive and Developmental Systems and Cognitive Systems Research. And I think she was the program chair of ICDL, that is like a conference of our hearts in the area. So we are going to enjoy a lot what she has to bring to us. And I think most of our students are really curious to see what you're doing. And I just want to make a quick thank here as well to my PhD student, Leticia, that is responsible for us knowing you. So Leticia was the one that was presenting in ICDL and met Ana and Alessandra. And we hope we have a very fruitful work if APESP lets us do it in the next year. So thank you so much, Alessandra, again, and I'll let you to talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us, indeed. Let me try and see if I can share the screen. Yes, it seems to slowly work. Okay, perfect. It is a pleasure for me to have this occasion, since I really believe that we share common interest. And today I want just to give you a sort of overview of what our objectives are and the question that we are trying to address with our research that already Ana introduced quite well. First of all, I would start to say that a common problem that even listening to media you encounter often is that people are interrogating themselves about what it is intelligence, what does it mean to have intelligent machines, and sometimes the paradigm of intelligence is boiled down to the idea of a machine that is able to win a chess game or a Go game, or anyway to exhibit very strong logical skill. But if you delve a little deeper, you immediately realize that what common people means when you are talking about an intelligent machine, an intelligent robot, is something more similar to these examples. So an agent that can do practical things, but that can do them together with us, that can coordinate or collaborate with a partner. So rather than a chess-winning robot, we, as an example, we are looking toward more something like that. So something that we exhibit as a skill since very young during our life. So the ability to establish a communication and establish a shared plan, anticipate what the other is doing, and be able to adapt accordingly. And if we consider this as benchmark, as objective, and we go and move and look at what technologies is providing us, with that we see what Ana was anticipating before. We have witnessed an incredible advance in terms of bodyware, of physical abilities of robots that are moving like us and moving better than we are. And we have also witnessed an important advancement in terms of AI on solving very complex logical problems. Machines are beating us very well. But whenever machines, technology is faced with the issue of interacting with us, here we see problems arriving. And that sometimes come really as unexpected, because we say, how is it possible that a robot that can do a backflip is not able to guess when it is the right moment to pass me an object? It's really very strange to us. But to be fair, it's not robots' fault. Indeed, it's mostly our fault, because to us it looks so easy, so simple, because our entire perception of the world is, up to a certain point, socially shaped by our embodiment. we don't see the world for what it is, or for what a sensor can perceive the world or process the world. Our perception is a much more complex process that takes into account not only what the information actually is in front of our eyes, but rather also all our internal models, all our prior experience. If you look at how perception works in humans, even just visual perception, it applies to any kind of perception though, it is an inferential process. So our brain is of course using the information coming through the senses, but it's not stopping there. It's integrating, filling the gaps by leveraging on what we know, what we acquired through experience. So, I don't know, faces, all the faces we generally see are convex. So if I see something that looks like a face, my brain will make it perceive as convex, even though it is concave in reality. So we realize that this process is ongoing when this leads us to failure. So the typical case is that of optical illusions. There, we realize that we are not merely photographing what's there, but rather our brain is putting a lot of additional information to make sense of the world. But this is something that happens all the time, continuously. So we are perceiving the world in a way that is deformed by our expectation, by our previous experience. And also at the cognitive level, where our understanding of others and of our surroundings is heavily shaped by bias. And these biases make us perceive and understand things not accurately, if you want, but this is not per se a negative aspect. Rather, this bias could actually be functional because they force us to focus and pay attention to what might matter more for us to interact efficiently with others and with the world. So I think that a very nice and paradigmatic example of the fact that we use our own knowledge to really make sense of what's happening in front of us, it's the example of the mirror neuron system. So the presence in our brain of areas that fire, that respond both when we are performing an action and when we are observing the same action performed by someone else. This really tells us that when we are trying to understand, predict what another person is doing, we are reusing, leveraging our internal knowledge that we built by acting, by moving. This in practice means that we have a sort of internal vocabulary that allows us, facilitate us in the understanding through a sort of direct matching between what we did and what this other person is gonna do. And this has a strong consequence, the fact that then each of our actions becomes per se a form of communication. And this applies to the simplest acts of our life. So as in this example, the Icub, this little robot that you see here in red, well, it can perceive that there is an object, that there is this person, and a movement, the movement of passage of the object toward the robot. But this is not what a human sees. What I see looking at this picture is that Carlo, the guy, has a goal, passing that object to Icub. So I see the intention, but also from his face, from the posture, I understand also a bit about his internal state. So he's well disposed toward Icub. It looks kind toward him. It seems happy. And I can say even something about the object because I can notice that Carlo is handling it with particular care. So I can realize that he is attached. This object matters for him. You see, we are seeing a lot of precious information because next time we have to interact with Carlo in a similar situation, we can use these details to really adapt and change our attitude toward him. And unfortunately, most of machines are totally blind to this rich sources of knowledge. But for us, it's super easy because it is something that we start doing since the dawn of our life. So newborns are already attracted more to biological motion, so to the movement of living beings, or they are good at detecting whether a person is looking toward them or not. And very early in the first months of life, they undergo an incredible development of social skills. So they can understand actions in terms of their goals rather than from the movements. They develop instrumental helping, so they can understand whether you are failing in reaching your goal and then try to help you. These are skills that most robots have not yet, and we acquire them before acquiring language. So this implies that if we want really to establish this kind of mutual understanding between humans and robots, and we want also for robots to be able to establish shared goals and communicate shared intention, we need to make sense of this very strong wealth of embodied communication. So all these silent signals that belong to our actions and that are very helpful for us to determine what the next act of the other person is, what the need of the other person is. So this is, of course, an interesting object of investigation, but at the same time is incredibly difficult because most of these exchanges happen below our level of awareness, so they are unconscious. Most of them occur at the same time. So just by looking at me now, you are processing unconsciously both the tone of my voice, where I'm looking, how I'm moving, beyond what I'm saying, of course. So being able to disentangle this very rich, dynamic and continuous exchange is really difficult. And therefore, we believe that robots can help us in this process. So the idea could really be the one of having a robotic platform, a humanoid robot, as a tool to disentangle and orderly studying the phenomenon of interaction. And the examples that we take and that Anna has anticipated nicely in her talk is that of the Icub as a platform that is actually born with this objective in mind, because it was one of the results of the RoboCup project, whose aim was indeed that of developing a platform that could help us study a complex system as the human being. And this kind of approach, we have seen it works, and it works nice to study different aspects of cognition, and making also the Icub as a sort of a little famous actor in the world. But in our application particularly, it really becomes a tool to investigate the mysteries of human-human interaction. And of course, a question can be raised of why studying interaction, which is inherently something that belongs to the human domain originally, with a robot and not just with humans. Well, the robot brings three important advantages. First of all, it is an interaction partner. It is an agent that lives in the world, which I, as an experimenter, can fully control. I can control what it sees or perceives. I can control what it does. It is a humanoid agent, physical, so it can move in the same environment I'm moving in and use the same object and tools. And the other important component is that it's a system which is sufficiently complex to enable to close the loop. So it can interact with me in my own environment, in my natural environment, and at the same time monitoring what I'm doing, processing, deciding, and reacting continually. So this really allows us to delve into the dynamics of an interaction, a real interaction, during the interaction itself, while not losing control. The other question can be, well, we have the possibility with robots to really create any kind of morphology. So why to go for a humanoid and not something else? Well, the reason that we are opting for using humanoids is really that we are focusing on human level intelligence. This is the question that we're interested in. So the human ability to interact. And for us humans, the humanoid shape and the peculiarities, the signature of human motion matter. So our brain is actually sensitive to these regularities. And since we're wanting to understand how we humans work, the use of a humanoid robot allows us to ping, to tap into the very same mechanisms that are active during human-human interaction. And the focus is mostly on actions, indeed, rather than on speech in our analysis. And on that, we based our choice also on some very early intuition, for instance, by Charles Darwin, who already stated very clearly that when it comes to understanding others in terms of their feeling and their action and their goals, actions are much, much more informative than words. So we are using this robot as a tool to investigate the human ability to interact and collaborate and to establish mutual understanding and prediction. And to do that, what we are actually trying is to insert the robot within the very same exchange of signals that we normally use in human-human interaction. This is a similar slide to the one that Anna showed before. What we are doing is really to try and allow the Icub, and in general, a robot, a machine, to read, so to notice these very subtle signals that reveal a lot of information about human internal state or goals, and also the dual side of the coin. So letting the robot understand or model how to move, to be as expressive as a human. So knowing what a human is sensitive to, choosing the movements and the behaviors that are more explainable, that are more legible to the eyes of the partner. And in the next slides, what I'd like to do is to give you some concrete examples of what this kind of research looks like in the lab. So what are we doing to investigate these topics? Well, let's start from the first side. So enabling a machine to be sensitive to human emitted, if you want, signals, to communication embedded in human actions. And first of all, we started small. So we started really from newborns' inspiration. As I mentioned, newborns are able to detect, and we don't know yet how, whether what is moving in front of their eyes is a movement caused by a living being or not. And so we were wondering whether it is possible to recreate a similar skill on a robot, of course, without very strong a priori knowledge, because we can't expect that a newborn has very strong a priori knowledge about, I don't know, what high human is or what skin color should be. And we started from some regularities that are common to biological motion that we know, for instance, from studies on writing. So some regularities in how the velocity of a movement is correlated to the curvature of the movement in writing or in general movement in humans. And we found out that by drawing inspiration from these regularities and then letting the robot learn through examples by observing non-biological and biological motion, it was possible for the robot really to generalize the detection, biological versus non-biological, also to never seen before examples. And that is interesting because it is a basic skill, but this implies that the robot can now detect whether there is a living being around without the need of recognizing the shape of a human or a face of a human, even when a human is not in view, but you're just observing a tool movemented by a human. Because if I move an object, the movement of the object will have this biological signature. And this allows, for instance, the robot to realize that in the scene there is someone moving an object without seeing this someone ahead, and then reorienting maybe the attention to look for this interesting someone. And the beauty of this is that even though it was inspired by a newborn, so very, very young child, it leads to the robot some capabilities that, first of all, are scalable and are beneficial. For instance, this works even in case of occlusions, or even in case you can't see properly the eyes or the face or the entire structure of a human, which is something that more traditional solutions fight or encounter problems with. And this is one example. Another example, always connected to the idea of motion, was the possibility to understand something about the nature of an object just by observing how a human would move it. And here we developed a way for the robot to detect whether an object needs to be treated with care or not by observing how someone is moving it. And the basic analysis of the motion is really made with or starting from the same approach that was designed for biological motion detection. The robot is extracting just a geometrical feature from the optical flow, so from the apparent motion of the person, and is able, after a little training, to actually detect, without knowing anything about the object itself, whether the motion could be done as careful or not. Another important source of information is, of course, also facial expression. So being able for the robot to infer, let's say, the reaction of the person toward what robot has done in the past. And there have been different methods developed over the years. And what we use it often is to enable the robot to monitor the state or have an inference on the reaction of the person toward the current simulation. For instance, in a training task, as the one you are observing here, to allow the robot to monitor not only the physical performance or the learning during the task, but also if there are like signs of the internal state of the person, as a way to monitor engagement or the status of the trainee. Another precious source of information is that coming from eyes. So eyes provide us every day a lot of details on what the person is going to do next or what the person desires. And we try to quantify that. So how informative are actually eyes in revealing what to do, what to pass? And we found out that they are incredibly important. So in this little task that we ran some years ago now, participants had to fetch or ask the robot for different objects it had in its hands, but the robot was monitoring just their eye gaze direction. Participants didn't know that. So you see they are talking, pointing, smiling. So they are entertaining a very natural conversation and interaction with the robot. The robot is blocked and forced to monitor only eye gaze direction. Even with this limitation, it is able to understand when it is its turn to pass the object and which object to pass in the vast majority of cases, about 97% of the times. And this reveals us how precious, how rich this kind of communication implicit is in the context of interaction. More recently, we have explored not only the study of gaze direction, but rather also the information coming from the pupil size of the person. And we found out that if you have access to this information, you can monitor very well cognitive load of the partner, even in a context of very natural and short-term interaction like a game. So in the example on the right, what you can see is that the person is either lying or not about the card descriptions in a game, in a card game, and the robot is able more than 70% of the time to guess in real time whether the person is lying or not about the description, leveraging mostly or essentially on the information about the pupil dilation of the participants. So these are a few examples of the feature that we have explored. We are exploring also others at the moment, for instance, study learning by imitation, or investigating which features in the behavior can reveal whether the person is comfortable or not during an interaction. But we believe that this is very crucial for the robot to be aware of how humans are interacting with it and the word, even without the need of explicit description of speech. As I was mentioning, though, reading humans is just one side of the task. The other as important task is to be communicative toward the humans. And we explore this again, considering different information. So we are communicating continuously the rhythm of our movements. And this is connected indeed to the activation of the mirror neurons. When I walk with some of you along a street and I start speeding up, you start speeding up. If I slow down, you slow down, and vice versa. This is a sort of automatic imitation that our brain intuitively puts in place to facilitate coordination. And it is mediated by the mirror neuron system. We investigated whether a similar phenomenon, which of course facilitates collaboration, happens also for robots, at least humanoid robots. And we found that it is yes. So if I see a robot performing an action and then I do the same action, I will try to attune my speed to that of the robot. The interesting point, though, was that this worked very well and very nicely as far as the robot moved according to a biological velocity profile, so capturing the regularities of biological motion in its own behavior. When it started moving, same task, same actions, with a constant speed, so different constant speeds, this phenomenon of automatic imitation stopped to work. And this revealed to us that, of course, the humanoid shape is important, but it's not enough. Rather, the spatial-temporal regularities of how you control the robot are crucial if you are to tap into the very same mechanisms of coordination that make human-human interactions so easy. And we also tested whether similar phenomena occurred in a slightly more natural settings in which the robot and the human are performing together a task, like putting Lego bricks into a box. And we found out indeed that it happens, so there is an adaptation. And we also compared it cross-culturally, comparing an Italian sample population with a Japanese sample population, where, of course, the culture toward interaction with robots is very different. And what we found out is that this phenomenon is very similar, even across the two cultures, suggesting that this automatic adaptation is really something that is strongly related to our basic motor skills and interaction skills, and then survives even difference in the culture of interaction with robots. Recently, we've also explored a slightly more, a slightly diverse, if you want, type of communication, the communication of an attitude. So whenever you see me move, you can immediately feel whether I'm aggressive toward you or I'm gentle and kind. And we wanted to see whether even a robot could effectively communicate different styles or attitudes with its own motion alone. So you see, we are not exploring facial expression here. And so what we tried was first to try to implement, to retarget gentle or aggressive movements from human actors onto the robot. And we found out that, yes, people recognize the actions of the robot as gentle or aggressive, but more importantly, by monitoring and measuring their neural activation while observing the robot moving gently or aggressive, we found out that we obtained the very same activation in the dorsocentral part of the insula, which is the part of the brain that usually responds to action style for human action. And this means that even if it is a robot, if you program it properly, it can really reactivate the same areas that are responsible for human-human interaction. And I can tell you that it was not an easy job, because at first we imagined that what mattered was, let's say, a simple modulation on the peak velocity. A gentle movement is low, an aggressive movement is fast. And we implemented just that on the robot. And this didn't lead to a neural activation that was similar between human and robot observation. Only when we retargeted more precisely the detailed differences in the kinematics regularities of the robot movement, of the human movement, on the robot, only then we found out that the brain responded. And again, this brain states how important it is to capture these regularities in the way we program the robot, because otherwise our brain will respond differently. It will be treated as a different thing. And this is interesting scientifically, of course, but it has also a very strong behavioral implication. Because what we found out is that if the robot indicates to you an object, either in a gentle or in an aggressive way, when it is your time to fetch the object, you will move in an gentle or an aggressive way. In other words, there can be an attitude contagion as far as the robot moves properly. And this, of course, has a very strong impact on how the interaction will unfold in the future. And it's still true, even if you're not interacting with a humanoid robot, but with the manipulandum. This is a robotics arm. And if the robotics arm gives you either a gentle or an aggressive disturbance, then in your next motion, you will change your kinematics to be either more gentle or an aggressive. So this is very informative in the sense that little modulation on how the robot performs the simplest of gestures can really change the mood of how the entire interaction will unfold. And again, also in this case, I was mentioning a few examples of the kind of features that we are studying, but the communication that you can achieve through motion is so much wider than this. And if you're interested, I could suggest a book that we published last year. Actually, we edited it. The contribution inside are really, really nice. And they really target the topic of modeling human motion, why it is important, why it matters, from three different perspectives. From the human studies perspective, so neuroscience, from the computational perspective, so why computer vision and machine learning in general are facing this question and how they are doing it, and the field of robotics. So why does it matter for robotics, and how can you implement proper motion in a robotic platform? I hope that with this short overview of the kind of research, I convinced you that it is possible, and there is a lot to study about this subtle mechanism that make the core of our interaction skills. On the other hand, I have to recognize and acknowledge that this kind of study allows us to analyze as just a segmented property, a unique or a single component of the system. So just the aspect of one particular perception or a very limited aspect of action. And this is not the overall interaction. And that's definitely true. On the other hand, having a robot as Icub allows us also to take a different approach, a more exploratory kind of study, and investigate more complex social constructs. And this is what we did, for instance, trying to study trust. So in this case, what we did was to try to use the robot as an agent in a very almost free-form interaction in a game, very structured, very complicated if you want, and then try and study how the social natural behavior of the human would unfold. And so I give you just one of the example experiment that we run. So we had a treasure hunt, so a game in which participants had to find hidden objects in a room, and Icub was there and was offering its help. So if they wanted a hint, they had to touch the robot. Interestingly, at the end of the game, if the participants had found all the hidden objects, the robot was also offering a gamble. So it was saying, oh, nice, you found everything. Well, I reveal you that there is another hidden object. If you go and try and find it as well, you might double your winning. But if you don't find it, you lose everything. I suggest you to gamble. What we wanted to do was to analyze, first of all, the natural interaction with the robot, how much people normally trust it, and also whether they went on with the trust to follow or not the robot suggestion, leading to gambling. What we found out was, first of all, that people come in with very different attitudes toward the robot. So some people really are, from the start, very reliant on robot's help. Others refuse to rely on it. On the other hand, by looking at the interaction over time, we noticed that it was enough, this very short interaction time, it was about 30 minutes with a little dialogue at the beginning, to change the way people related with the robot. There was a significant increase in the number of times they asked for help over time. There was a general strong conformation with the robot, also increasing in most cases. So if the robot suggested something, participants tended to follow the hints, and also the distance from the robot after the robot asked to come closer significantly decreased and stayed there. So we noticed that already this very nice and short game-like interaction was sufficient to change the behavior toward the robot. Looking more precisely at trust, we found out that 100% of the participants who arrived to the possibility to gamble actually did that. And most of them, when asked, they suggested that the fact that the robot had suggested that had an important impact. We also delved a bit deeper in their understanding of the robot through questionnaires, and we found out that even, again, the interaction was relatively short. It was sufficient to significantly change their belief about the possibility for the robot to have experience, so to experience pain, joy, fear, which is something that usually is evaluated as very low in robots. Another thing that we observed was that the rapport with the robot increased significantly. And here came out something that was totally unexpected. That is, participants who had the larger increase in the rapport with the robot were the ones who decided to gamble and lost everything. So this was opposite to all our hypotheses, because we imagined that the stronger rapport would have been with participants who had taken the advice of the robot and won. But this was not the case. And this tells us that even this, let's say, toy studies, because they were run in a lab with a lot of limitation, allows us to unveil phenomena and social mechanisms that are absolutely complex and not easy to be predicted upfront. And more recently, we went on to study further in this direction to see whether what happens when the robot starts breaking, because in the former study, the robot was always providing the right hints and was always perfectly functioning. And we created very brutal kind of breaking. We also validated them online, with the robot crashing in the middle of the game even. And we ran then the real game study again when the robot was actually crashing during the game. And for half of the participants, the robot crashed and that's it. For other half of the participants, the robot was transparent. So it also tried to give a reason. Sorry, my motors broke, or my sensors broke, something like that. And the interesting point that we found was by looking both at the behavioral responses and at the questionnaire participants gave, was that being transparent, which is something that is usually suggested as a way to mitigate problems with trust, was really detrimental in our settings. And the other unexpected result was that failures did not have such a big impact in the way participants trusted the robot. So all our a priori hypotheses, that is that failures would have reduced trust and that trust would have been mitigated, this loss of trust, by transparency, were absolutely negated, suggesting that again, this concepts of trust toward robotics, for instance, still require a lot of investigation, and running experiments, even in controlled settings with in the lab with the robot, can be a good way to start approaching these questions in a more efficient and with different results that you often obtain if you just go for online questionnaires. So to summarize, I think we have explored a wide range of different signals that are important in establishing a precious interaction, and we also combined a bit of them in more structured kind of experiments, game-like experiments, in which the robot behaved as if it were already intelligent. But and there is still a lot that the signals and this investigation can give us, but the problem is actually what Anna was anticipating before. So what we need now to go beyond these single studies is really to start having an architectural perspective. And in this sense, we are really trying to find a way to integrate this perception and action mechanisms that we have studied in isolation with other important components like memory, internal simulation, motivation, so as to enable the robot to maintain and autonomously predict what is going to happen and adapt consequently. As Anna anticipated, this is not a novel attempt. There is a lot of literature suggesting the importance of studying and building cognitive system with cognitive architectures. One thing that, however, sometimes happens when studying and also drawing inspiration from human development is that often the focus is on a situation like this one. So where an agent, a baby in disguise, is expressing a lot of curiosity, motivation, action, perception skills, maybe memory, learning for sure, but it is seen as a sole and alone agent. But this is not the complete picture, because if we think at the real life of a child, well, the proportion of time that the child spends in interaction with his caregivers, with peers, with the teachers is so much larger and so important for the development of cognition. And this is a part that we believe is still under represented in the current approach to cognitive architecture. Indeed, coming back to the Kotzeruba review that Anna mentioned before, if we look at the 7 pillars plus one proposed by David Vernon of core cognitive abilities that have been identified and shared among the vast majority of this architecture, nothing related to affect or social skill comes out. And this, according to us, is something that would need now further attention, more attention, especially in sight of the revolution that has been there in other fields like neuroscience, where the entire vision that the way of our brain works can be studied in isolation has been strongly put under discussion, even suggesting that social abilities might not emerge from lower level cognitive functions in humans, but actually could be the default mode in which humans communicate with the environment. So I think that this is a very interesting insight for the future development, and we started slowly to try and insert this kind of vision in the cognitive architecture that we are developing. This is actually the work that Anna pursued in developing an architecture that could entail also an internal motivation of the robot, which was inherently connected to prosocial abilities of the robot. And more recently, we have explored different frameworks in which we foresee both an adaptation in the short term, so while the interaction is ongoing, but also a long-term adaptation, even a personalization, by which the robot monitors the state, the preference, the performance of participants over multiple times, and then starts to learn for each of the participants what is the right way, the best approach to interact with that participant. And again, these are just examples of the different lines that we are pursuing in the group to interrogate ourselves on how to best try to address this entire question of creating cognitive robots that are able to see beyond the here and now, and can have an understanding of the world that is more similar to what we as humans share. In this perspective, I'm really grateful for the Icub Cognitive Architecture Initiative in terms of the possibilities that it opens to really discuss together with a wide and open community about what to do next, which are the next steps. The general goal is that of having more humane robots. So robots that are more considerate of humans, that can think or understand how a human would think in a similar situation, so as to be able to adapt to them. And I think that the road toward that is still long and interesting to be traveled. Of course, the work I presented here, it's the result of a wonderful group. Here a picture, almost updated, but with a lot of incredible researchers coming from very different backgrounds that are making it possible, which I want to thank. And of course, I want to thank you for your attention, and I will be very happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Alessandra, for your talk. So I would like to, I have, again, lots of questions, but I will open to the audience. So if anything has questions here, I don't know, Wanda, Fabio, Leticia, and the guys that are watching us, you can open your mic or you can raise the hand to know. Leticia just told me that they decided to change her internet communication right now, so she's trying to get to her mobile phone. So any questions? I think the guys are a bit shy. I have a provocative one. I don't know. It's like the idea that we talk about embodiment a lot, and Leticia in her master's, she proposed a lot of Piagetian-based experiments that we could like increasingly watch the development and assess the quality, like, as we do with children, as try to assess this development. But we know that Piaget lacked one thing in his experiments, that was the social interaction. It seems that humans have like bootstrap conditions, or babies have some bootstrap information around towards biological systems, like bias towards biological systems, or towards humans itself, like the face recognition, and probably like for survival skills, like to understand the mother and look for nurturing and so on. So I do agree with you that social interaction is definitely important, but how could we take these social interaction aspects towards agents? And I think this question is broader than just for the social interaction, but how can we take the things that are related to the embodiment to smart agents that do not have a body? Like, how can I do it in a mobile, or even like these real smart agents that we want to put in the world, but that they don't have the same body of a humanoid? Could you have a mind of a humanoid without having the body? What do you think about it?
I think it's a path. So my answer is that it's actually a path in phases. So I think we definitely need some humanoid embodiment to understand how the human thinks, how we build our representation, how we also bias our representation as a function of our body, look at the affordances, the social affordances, etc. The ambition, though, is that as soon as we have captured what really matters, what are the basic mechanisms, how this representation are developed. So when we start really having an understanding of how the human model is made, then we won't need a human embodiment anymore, or a humanoid embodiment anymore in the system. So I think this is instrumental to build the mind of a human. When you know how the mind of a human, or you can approximate a bit how the mind of a human works, then you need for a robot to have that, to adapt its behavior with its own embodiment or lack of embodiment to fit with what it predicts the human will perceive or will need. So it is really, the problem is that I see particularly challenging is reaching this endpoint without passing through the embodiment investigation. So that I find it really challenging. On the other hand, there are already in our kind of studies some results that now can be ported into a disembodied machine. So, for instance, what we found out about the cognitive load measuring through the eyes movement or through the eyes dilation that was studied in a context of embodied interaction with the robot. Now we can abstract it enough to have it applied in, let's say, very different machines, very different contexts, because we could arrive to the basic mechanism. And we hope that this holds true also for other phenomena. I spoke about this automatic imitation of the style of the movement, of the carefulness, or even of the timing. This is something that so far has been proven just with humanoid robots. But we believe that the humanoid form maybe is not necessary. Maybe it's sufficient to have some, let's say, a degree of structure that recalls good enough or well enough the structure that we have in our motor control. And this is what we are going to study soon, actually. So your provocative question is actually at the core, I would say, of the research that is ongoing, because if in the end we would come out with a comprehension that fits only to humanoid robots, it would be a very limited, awesome already, but quite a limited achievement, whereas the ambition is much wider than that.
Yeah, great. I do agree. I think that I think humanoid robots are really important for the research, because it's the only way. There might be another one, but I feel like it's the easiest way to disentangle everything together by understanding itself and then adapting to something that is different. I don't know if this whole interaction with machines that we have been from an evolutive sense, we have been having for not so much time compared to the interaction with other biological systems. if our brain is going to absorb these and pass through generations. Like you see kids now interacting with, like they are born and submitted to work with iPads and touching structures that are not natural for older generations, but for them it's quite like direct. Probably because they are approached with that from the beginning, but maybe with like time, these other kind of interactions are going to be like embodied in our mind and passed towards generations. But this might take long time for us. So probably the approach where a humanoid mind would be the agents would be the easiest approach to learn how cognition actually works. But I remember that Professor Brooks said that when he created Baxter, people asked, why do you put eyes on Baxter? And he said, because the human that is interacting with Baxter has to understand where uses the eyes of Baxter to understand what is Baxter trying to do next. So the idea of having the eyes to express what the robot, the intentions of the robot, was really important. But imagine that now we are going to use robots that don't have, or agents like Alexa or these kind of things that don't have this set of embodiments that we have. How could we also, I think that's like the next step of trying to interact humans and machines, is like this kind of like expressions in ways that we can do, because the Alexa doesn't have eyes, for instance. Do you have like, I don't know, I know that this is probably the next step, but how people are approaching this, like in cognitive robotic science and so on, because people that are working with these service robots that are not actually humanoids or don't have everything that we need, they are approaching these challenges in some way. Do you have any like path towards this?
Do you want to go, Anna? Otherwise, I have.
I can add a small comment if you like, but go ahead first.
I was okay. So there are different solutions that I'm aware of. So for mobile robots, there is several companies also, or researchers that are trying to find alternative symbolic kind of communication that are trying to compensate for that. So this is also a discussion with self-driving cars, for instance, or pallet moving robots, in which there is this idea of having lights or flashes, or which are, let's say, alternative solutions to try and find an implicit form of communication, especially in those contexts in which audio would not be, speech would not be a way, because of noise, because of time issues, because of incomprehension. I find this kind of research interesting. On the other hand, sometimes passing through the symbolic requires a learning from the side of the human. We are very good at it, so it's okay. But I do believe this would be much more efficient if we could find solutions that are more similar to what Brooks did with Baxter. So that was a clever move. And in this direction, there is a lot of research, for instance, on manipulating the kinematics of the movement, so that the movement itself, like the entire energy of the movement, is somehow communicating the intention of the robot. So among the different solutions, this is the one that I like best. For disembodied agent, this is even more so we have agents that are disembodied physically, but at least have a virtual embodiment that's already something which can be used, of course, to convey implicit information through the movement. For fully disembodied agents like Alexa and the like, that's really challenging, because a lot of the approaches I've seen are really playing on the contents of the speech. So they're really trying to use the semantics to do that. But this is an entire new layer. I mean, we up to 2 years of age, we don't use that, and still we are very good at inferring others. So a possibility a bit is by using a modulation of the prosodic signal. But again, this is like a challenging. To me, the only solution I see is really constraining the problem into like interactions in which the robot, so that actually the artificial agent can be proactively know what to expect, so as to process more predictively what the person reacts to, and then having already a sort of preset knowledge on how to modulate its own behavior accordingly. But again, your analysis, it is a next step. Yes, at least to the kind of research we're pursuing, we feel it is really as a next step. And in that case, I definitely try and work more probably on the understanding the human, and have less reliance on communicating to the human. So I find it particularly challenging.
I also just wanted to add a small comment on this, like both on your previous question, Esther, and on what Alessandra was saying now, because I think it's the concept of embodiment here has two questions, which is how cognition manifests and how cognition develops. For the first one, I would argue, same as you said, that a physical body, especially the one of a humanoid robot, I don't think it is necessary in order to have a cognitive agent interacting with us. Because as soon as we have sufficient, and I mean, we do have to an extent, let's say, sufficient understanding of the cognitive processes of a human, it's a matter of implementing them. And then, as Alessandra was saying, you take advantage of whatever modalities of interaction you have at your disposal. If it's a virtual agent that's embodied, so an avatar, you still have kind of a humanoid, let's say, albeit not physically present, but humanoid modalities of interaction. If it's something that's fully disembodied, you use other implicit signals, but the knowledge of the cognitive processes is there and can be programmed. It's not something that can then further develop in a way that it develops in humans. For how cognition develops, that's where I think it's kind of fundamental that we use humanoid robots, because our model of cognition is based on how cognition develops in human, which starts with babies, with toddlers, and we have how our knowledge, how our learning develops over time with our bodies. And I think that was a very, very strong comment in favor of having embodied robots in order to study cognition that can develop by itself. So not a pre-programmed solution that you put on Alexa and it's there, it can adapt perfectly and wonderfully, but it's not something that organically, spontaneously developed, it's something that we programmed. What we are still trying to understand is if it's possible to have a developmental approach to cognition, and that is very complex.
Yeah, it's the challenge itself, isn't it? But I do think that trying to aim for the full intelligent agent without learning how to develop is like a dead end, because you have to build the blocks. It's evolution. We can learn from evolution and see that there are some things that are there from the beginning and the others are built and depend on our experience and the world that we've been, we have a lot of examples from that. So from people that are in the audience and want to see, there are plenty of work related to that. So how to different two agents that have the same structure, but they are robots submitted to different experience, they develop differently, or two agents with the same that are submitted to the same experience, they behave differently just because you change a small thing in their structure, just like a small, a driver level or a need, a basic need level, I need more food than you do, probably I will behave differently even if I am submitted to the same circumstances. So I think that's really nice to use robots to see that. And my question was related to this embodiment, but maybe in the metaverse, all the agents will have bodies and we won't have to worry about that. But we still have for a few minutes more. Does anything want to make any questions? I don't know if Leticia was able to. Leticia. Le, do you want to speak or we can read here? I think she has problems with the communication. Okay. Yes, so, if you do work with the interaction between robots and people with some disability, like autism, etc., And what are the challenges? I think Fabio, one of our members in the audience, has worked with that in like not with robots, but with these in cognitive systems. But Alessandra, Ana?
I will start and then I leave the place to Anna, which is definitely going to answer that in more detail. Indeed, what we are aiming is really to have the robot considerate, and I said of humans, but what I actually meant was of the individual needs of each human. So we start from basic abilities that we think are common models for most humans, like these regularities of biological motion, of gazing. They are very general across even different cultures, different people, because they are really tied with our own motor control, our own development as a human being. But this is the starting point where we generalize. But then the next step is really that of the adaptation, in which I try to understand you. So you, in terms of what are your specific needs, your specific kinematic skills, your specific social skills, and the ambition is for the robot to start with the basic models for general, but then to learn through the interaction to adapt to this. And this matters in particular exactly when you're facing a disability. So when you're facing people which are different needs, so definitely it's our interest which are targeting in this more general sense. But then I leave the floor to Anna that could address more precisely your question.
Thanks, Ale. Here we also have, and I think it's important to mention, like the groups that we have at IIT, like UVIP and others that work with physical disabilities, for instance, with differently sighted individuals, or with people with some kind of physical motor disabilities, because that already allows us to learn a lot more about the physical interaction, not necessarily with humanoid robots, but just between those individuals and the robots, how they differ from the healthy population, let's say. And it allows us to change our adaptation mechanisms so that we are more inclusive for everyone. Moreover, when we talk about interaction and adaptation, here we have, as I said, physical, but also social. More specifically for myself, I have worked, and that was before coming to IIT for my PhD, I worked with autistic children. That one was more of a wizarded interaction, but it was one to try and understand the modalities of interaction. So how autistic children interact with the robot. And I mean, it's nothing new. People have reported on this a lot. Autistic children definitely prefer interacting with a robot. It provides a more stable, more repetitive interaction. It has all of the modalities that are less intrusive than interacting with a person, especially people that have high support needs, that autistic people with high support needs, which are very easily overwhelmed by a lot of sensory cues, such as we as humans provide, find the robots very, very soothing to interact with and very predictable in a positive way. So at any given stimulus, if it's the same stimulus, the robot will respond the same way, which is something that a human as an assistant or as a therapist cannot always do. What I would like to then maybe in the future of my research get back on is now doing the same kind of interaction with autistic people, but not in a wizarded way. So having the autonomous robot interact. I have done in the scope of my PhD work on adaptation in human-robot interaction, where the robot is tracking the modalities of the person. So how they interact in terms of visual cues, so of their proximity to the robot, of their facial expression, and of their tactile interaction. So how often they like to touch the robot and in what way. And it tries to adapt to this. So to the frequency, how often they like to interact, for how long, and the adaptation mechanism was based on this. I would be interested to revisit this with autistic people. I think that a very promising way in this line of research is participatory design, actually, where you have focused groups with whatever age target group it is, so whether they're children or adolescents or autistic adults, and you try to understand what are their expectations, and then you design the interaction based on that. So that's something I would be very interested to start in the future.
Great. I think it's a great answer. And we probably are going to add for the next future in like the close future, we hope to add to HIAC line of research associated to social robots and social agents. So although we do it like separately, but we hope to have formally this line of research in our group as well. So let's see how things move. But I think now we are going to like our a few minutes. I would like really much to thank you. It was amazing for talking to watch what you've been doing, to see the prospects of your research for the near future. I probably people are going to flood you with questions later and send you requests to more information. But I think if you could send us the information from it's going to be in our website, but I can put more information about the talk and of ICOG and the initiatives. Like we can put the general information in our website so people can look for more details. But again, I would like to thank you a lot, everybody from the hub, from our group, mainly Vanderberg, that was the one like organizing everything in El Dorado, the people from Softex, the Ministry of Science and Technology, Motorola, that has like had the idea of starting this research in our university. So it's a tech company, a mobile company that has like looked toward in the future and said, okay, we have to go towards cognitive systems and architectures if you want to go further. So I do thank them for helping us kicking off everything. And everybody that is researching, our students that are very excited what we are going to do next. And I do hope we can, Fabio as well. Fabio, I don't know if you open your mic, do you want to say anything?
Oh no, it was just want to say goodbye as well, just to get back, yeah.
Okay. So thank you again. And on behalf of the Hub and our coordinator, Professor Leandro, I would hope that we can work a lot together and hope to have you in Brazil as soon as we can travel abroad and bring you to a live conference in our institute, in our university.
That would be incredible. Thank you very much, Esther and Leticia.
Thank you very much again, indeed.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. Thank the Institute of Cognition, Fabio, and everybody for helping us organizing this. And I hope to stay tuned in our channel because we are going to have a series of talks, and Alessandra and Anna just opened with like good and key this series of talks. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye. Take care. Bye bye.